What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. On today's episode, I got a lot to get into. We'll be talking about the finals, the injuries to Hallie, where do the Thunder go from here? We got a lot of trades to talk about. KD to the Rockets. The Celtics begin their rebuild. They traded their two obvious pieces. Will they be done there? The Wizards setting up for the 2026 offseason. And of course, we'll have to talk about the NBA draft. It starts tonight. We're going to be making a few predictions on that to close out the show. But before we get into all that, Chris, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing good. We're in the middle of a heat wave here in Massachusetts and just stuck inside. I never thought I'd be actually complaining about the heat this bad in the middle of June, but here we are. But never better time to talk about basketball. Got the finals over. Got to get into the draft. It feels like this has been a draft that we've just assumed the end outcome of the first pick, so not a lot has gone outside of that. Maybe a little fun Dylan Harper Spurs kind of trade talk, but I'm excited to get in some prospects we like. But also excited, let's talk about the finals, man. We haven't had a chance to hop on air and do it. But I think I'll just open by saying just what an emotional finish to the season in the best and absolute worst ways possible. Um, I just gotta say that get the negative out of the way. That had to have been one of the most heartbreaking openers to a finals, to any championship of any sport I've seen. It rang so reminiscent of similar horrific injuries. Just thinking back to the Clay injury, thinking back to the KD injury. I think just maybe this is a personal thing for me, but just for what Tyrese represented to the Pacers and their hope and everything, seeing him go down just like gave me like Derrick Rose PTSD in a way of like, oh, that's it. And just seeing that light come out of his eyes and seeing him know like immediately like that was his opportunity, that was gone. That was so hard to watch. And I hated that the broadcast, they kept showing it. They showed it six
It was
times.
horrible, and like it was so like it was horrible to see. You really could. That was the first one I think of the season where you really actually could very clearly see the pop, and it was just horrible. I don't know how they didn't realize. Obviously, you show it once, thinking it's just like showing it falling down, but the fact that they saw that and they kept showing it was absolutely insane.
His face, man. It's his face too. That was the part for me. It was the realization in his face immediately. Oh, that was heartbreaking. That was and just watching his teammates, some affected more than others. Most of the guys picked it back up, but you saw how Toppin really never recovered from that, and he admitted as much at the end of the game. But really shell shocked. But there's such a roller coaster of emotion throughout that game because that was just so heartbreaking. But then you're just on your edge of your seat the whole game. So you're like, when is OKC going to pull away? But it really wasn't until near the end of the third before they did. Pacers really, I mean, an inspiring effort for them. You have to tip your cap. You really have to commend them for just a heroic effort and really making things difficult for the Thunder to get that win.
Yeah, and like I think we saw the impact of the Halley injury on the Thunder with their kind of muted celebrations at the end of the game. I think a lot of people have kind of talked about that. Like the Thunder did not react like a team that just won their first title after winning that game, like straight off the bat. And I think that was the impact of the Halliburton injury. I think that was probably on their minds, just like how like heartbreaking it was to see a fellow player go down like that, and also them probably wondering a little bit in their heads, would we be here if Halliburton hadn't got injured? Like how much did the impact did that have on the team? Because remember he had started super hot, 3 of 3 from deep, and he was looking good. So I think that was one of that thing definitely had a big impact on the Thunder. It's a kind of initial kind of somber reaction and not really celebrating like you would expect a team that's gone through so much and just won their first title to go through. But I mean, just such a great achievement for the Thunder, and obviously it turned into a really great finals that I don't think anyone was expecting, which I think we always needed to look back on and remember, and especially if this comes around again and we got those small market teams, just enjoy it. Unless you're actually working for the TV stations, who gives a crap about the ratings? If you enjoy basketball, you watch the finals and you enjoy it, and that's all that needs to be said. I mean, you can make the argument for sure that that's the best finals we've got since 2016.
Yeah, when's the last time we had a game seven? When's the last time you really weren't sure what the outcome was going to be? And I just I just can't talk enough about like how just inspiring this Pacers team was. Like how there's just never a better group of guys to represent a city and a team, a community that's just been dying to have such a an organization represent them. I mean, this is a basketball city at heart, it's a basketball state at heart, and to have that type of team, to have that type of effort, and despite the injuries, still fight to the bitter end. You know, I think they've created such a culture there that was inspiring to watch. You know, you don't have to be a fan of that team to watch that and be, you know, connected to that level of competition, be connected to that level of camaraderie, and especially for the Thunder too. Like, I think it's pretty amazing to me. I was like a fan. They became so good and so like villainously good that watching them throughout this playoffs, you're almost like finding yourself rooting against them because they became that good and that inevitable it felt like. But the inevitability of the Thunder, while it did play out in this series, you know, was tested against this, you know, this never quitting squad. And that made for, I feel like, one of the most exciting finals that I can remember watching in quite some time. And I mean, just way to like look back and what a journey for Sam Presti's Thunder. You know, this team that a few years back, you're not sure what they're doing. Is Shea like how good is Shea going to be? Is he really going to be that number one piece? They haven't really drafted anyone that's significant. Jalen Williams, he's interesting, I guess. Chet Holmgren, okay, he's a defensive piece at best. To see everything coalesce, and look, they got Caruso and Hartenstein, but to see everything coalesce this season to make it to the finals and win the finals despite the competition around them, like it's it's no joke to say that this is probably the most impressive rebuild we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like they've not traded for a star. They didn't jettison all their picks to go get that guy to work with their young guys. They made that trade, that infamous Paul George trade, and they got their guy, their young guy. But everything else they've drafted, everything else they've worked patiently for. Their coach was their G League coach. What a full circle moment. Caruso developed under that G League system with Daniel, comes back, right? And I just talk about cultures for the Pacers. What a culture they built there. I mean, you just see it on the stage. You see how together they are. That you see that they're just united in purpose. Um, and everyone is a testament to that. Even a guy going all the way down the roster to a guy like Casey Wallace, a guy who's probably more so suited to be like a budget burgeoning like number one option that could be developing on another number one team. But no, he's a role guy and he accepted being an elite role guy, especially for a young player like that. Just up and down the roster, guys who just sacrifice and like love the game and love competing to win championships. And dude, if this is the buy-in they get, like how can you deny the thought that they're the next dynasty? And then we had some discomfort maybe saying that about the Celtics, and I think that was just maybe because of like all the walls they had run into before. But I feel like a different comfort level saying that for this team. It feels like there's little there's little barriers to them right now, and they're just getting started.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's still to say it. Like I think a few of us are ready to say it about the Celtics. We've said it about other teams before. It hasn't come to fruition. You're kind of always only just that one injury away. It's just going to get interesting to see how they figure it. Can they follow the old San Antonio Spurs model with their star guys being willing to take a little bit less money so that they can help to keep the wider group together a bit more? I think that's if we see that happening, I think are Jalen and Chet both eligible this year or is it next year? Not 100% sure. Everyone's still under contract through next year anyway. But that's going to be kind of the area where you kind of see if the camaraderie and is enough for them. And you look at like obviously Shea's eligible for the super max next year, which is obviously I think 35% of the cap would be an insane contract. Which don't get me wrong, he deserves it if he wants to take it. I wouldn't knock him for that, but if you could see the three of those guys be willing to take that little bit less money to try and keep the bigger core together, that's when you kind of think, okay, yeah, this team can really is really gonna do great things over the next what like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean that's the conversation that's looming, those extensions. And Chet and Jalen are eligible for extension this year. They're both drafted in the same season, both third year. And I mean, Jalen's extension, that's going to be a max.
Mm.
Chet's, I can't imagine will be any less. And that's when we get to be, your Casey Wallace's, your Isaiah Joe's, your Aaron Wiggins, the guys who really were those X factors in moments. Like you don't get to this point without the tenacious defense of Casey Wallace. You don't get to this point without the spark that Aaron Wiggins has been off the bench. Like those guys were tangible pieces of this championship, and uh, that's gonna be tough. It's gonna be really tough, and that is the kind of paradoxical nature of um, our parity league that we've developed, where you want to value teams that come up and build their own talent, and you want to disincentivize, people just star hunting and everything like that. But what if you star develops? Like then you're just gonna have difficulty in this situation, and who knows what this team's gonna look like in a couple years because of that. But that's some difficult cap talk for another day. At the end of the day, man, just congratulations to first time champions, and congratulations to the Pacers for how far they came, and it's an achievement in and of itself to have made it this far. And who knows what could have been, but what did happen was, one of the most amazing postseasons that we've ever seen. One of the most magical Cinderella stories, and not just being a Cinderella. I think the Pacers have proven themselves. Hey, we are contenders. Halliburton go get healthy. We'll see what kind of development we get out of Ben Mathurin. Thinking about what's next. Can these guys take it to the next level while Halliburton's getting healthy? I'm excited to see what comes next for them.
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting. Obviously, we won't get into it today, but obviously with the Halley injury, and you look around the Eastern Conference, and it really, it really opens up. We'll get into that
Oh
at
yeah,
another time,
yeah.
but that Eastern Conference is looking wide open next season. But let's get into some trade stuff. Okay, we'll start with the big one. Kevin Durant to the Houston
Finally,
Rockets.
finally, finally, finally. I've been waiting. I've been waiting for this one. Instant reaction. How did you feel about that one?
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. It was the one that always made sense. In reality, I guess if you're thinking you're Houston and you could have got Devin Booker, that was probably maybe a little bit more ideal, a little bit more on the same time scale. But like Kevin Durant fills in exactly what they need as long as he's going to be there when they're in the playoffs. And they got him for so cheap. Like they got him
Hmm.
for effectively like they got him for Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks, and they had to give back the number 10 pick, which was already Phoenix's anyway. Like that is such a cheap deal for a guy like Kevin Durant and the impact that he could have in this team. Like think about these moments when their offense is looking ugly as hell. You just find the ball to KD. They're ISO heavy team that were bad at scoring ISO. Give it to Kevin Durant, who's arguably still the best ISO scorer in the entire NBA.
I gotta say, so there's a couple things with this, right? There's two ways to look at it. It's cheap, and then I think some people look at it and they're like, "Dang, Kevin Durant's 37, and you gave up your 23-year-old, and you gave up your." And some people will say their best. I think that's hype purely. Dylan Brooks is not their best defender. Amen Thompson is definitively their best defender. But Dylan Brooks is one of their anchors, and you have a 10th pick. We got to clarify this real quick. Number one, Jalen Green not being a part of this team was a possibility from the moment they signed him to that 2+1.
hmm
That was already cooking. This was, even if he had a decent postseason here, there still would have been questions next season if this was the perfect fit. Because the Rockets are in the final stages kind of mode. That they're not coming up with the recipe, they're plating the dish. They're figuring out what pieces are going to be on that plate. So I think Jalen Green, while I love him and I still think he's not a finished product, I don't think it's fair for a 23-year-old with his level of talent to be just pegged as, oh, he's that guy. But he's clearly in that system, not developed into a true primary playmaker that's going to take the Rockets in this current iteration to the next level. That, I think, enough has been shown. So why not give him another chance somewhere else, right? And Dylan Brooks, I mean, you lose Dylan Brooks, sure. You still have Amen Thompson. You've extended Fred VanVleet. You know what you're getting out of Tari Eason, and you know you get out of the rest of this team. Like this culture from top down, from Ime Udoka down, is that level of competition on the defensive end that you get from Dylan Brooks. I don't think that this team is just going to magically take a step back because you lose this dog and Dylan Brooks. You got the rest. And the 10th pick, Rockets were never going to take that pick. I
They
just can't
couldn't.
imagine that. Yeah,
They couldn't.
this
They couldn't
this
afford to bring out another young guy. They couldn't.
exactly. And no one there really fit what they needed as well. So the 10th pick never really mattered to them. What did matter, and I can't believe that the Suns traded Kevin Durant to the Houston Rockets and did not get a single one of their picks back.
But
I
number 10 was
think,
theirs.
well,
Number
none of
10
their
was
future
theirs.
picks is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
none of
yeah.
their future picks. And I can't, I understand that the reporting is that they don't want it. You know, they are not prioritizing, maybe I should say, because their priority is to get competitive. So fair. But for the Rockets on their end, you know, the value that they got, getting rid of a guy that I think they were ready to, and getting rid of a guy who is replaceable on their team, getting rid of a pick that they didn't want to slide in Kevin Durant,
Hmm.
who answers so many of their problems and fits in defensively too. I think defensively he fits in well. Offensively, like fits in like a glove. And he's not the way that he's played with the Suns as well, like he's not a dominant force that's going to really jar any sort of offensive development from the team. I think he's going to create that spacing. He's going to be a perfect release valve for this offense. And when they need him to be, like he can be a focal point. But I think it's a perfect situation in which he's not stressed defensively to be like a huge game changer on the defensive end. He can kind of relax a little bit compared to what he had to deal with last season. And offensively, like he doesn't have to be that level player. So when everyone's on the case about, oh, he's 37, like, yeah, he's 37. I mean, this is pretty simple stuff, but do you see his box score from last season as a 37-year-old? 26.6 points, 6 rebounds. He shot 53% from the field, shot 43 from three. Like, he's still mostly Kevin Durant. Is he going to be hurt? Probably. Is he going to be hurt less now that he doesn't have to play a lot of center minutes? He doesn't have to play a lot of big. He can kind of be a little more perimeter oriented where you can protect him a bit more. I hope so. I would think that's the idea. But I'm not, I can't see this as anything but like an A plus 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 trade from the Rockets, considering all those factors. I think it's just an absolute home run.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I'm excited now to see the likes of Terry Eason and Jabari Smith get some more minutes, and
Yeah.
hopefully they'll be
Yeah.
able to develop in a big way this year too, which is obviously a huge part of what Houston is trying to do. Maybe this like we still like have like Reed Shepherd still that wild card. He couldn't get into the team
Yes,
at all
exactly.
like last year. Can he find some minutes this year? There's still like a lot of things that can still go right for Houston despite obviously making this big move, and they also still have so much of their assets. So if they,
Yeah.
not to say they're still in the market for another big move, but if that got someone else wants to come available, like the Rockets wouldn't be out of the question either. When that just seems crazy to think of when the fact that they've just traded for a guy like Kevin Durant. On the Sun
I
side, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to totally agree with you because I did not even mention the Reed Shepherd part of it. That was my thought as well in terms of getting rid of Jalen Green and Jabari Smith, getting rid of Brooks. Like those two guys, I mean, you saw the flashes of Smith. He hasn't put it all together yet, but the flashes of Jalen Smith or Jabari Smith rather, you see a little bit of Kevin Durant in him in terms of his one dribble pull up game, his mid range game, his off ball shooting game. Like he's got shades of Kevin Durant and his ability to shoot, and who better to really be alongside him and to kind of see him through that development than the Kevin Durant and Reed Shepherd. How exciting we have seen him be in the G League and the flashes that he's had and how much this organization believes in him. I mean that is a win as well to prioritize their development of their guys.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And obviously, this trade can still get bigger. It won't be confirmed to July 6th. And I'm pretty. I feel pretty confident that this trade is going to get bigger. I don't know if the
Mm.
I feel like whoever the Suns draft at number 10 and maybe something else could be involved to expand this trade a little bit. It just feels like it's set up for that for some reason. I don't know who could be involved or what way they're going to work it, but it feels like this trade could get a little bit bigger and maybe like Phoenix need to do that because man, all Phoenix have now is like shooting guards and Royce O'Neal and Ball. I think even if I don't even know if Ball's still under contract with their team, but like it's like all shooting guards that they have now: Booker, Jalen Green, Grayson Allen. Obviously Brooks is more of a wing. Well, like it's actually just wing shooting guards. That's their entire team right now. Like Phoenix are obviously gonna have to make so many more moves, but my God, it just seems like such a disaster. And the fact that they're still going in with like the mantra of we want to be competitive and stuff like that. Like I know Devin Booker's getting paid a lot of money, but like he's got to be thinking like, what the hell am I doing here?
I That's the crazy part is like, you've not heard anything out of Devin Booker's camp.
No, I mean,
Nothing
if
but I want
anything
to be
you've
a
heard,
Sun.
I want to be the
Yeah.
Suns guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Respect. I respect that. And that's a whole different way to approach the game. And I think that's an honorable thing, man. Like if you feel like you just want to end your career there no matter what, like and they've obviously treated him well, they've paid him, he's been the guy there um through thick and thin.
He wants that 2 year, $150 million extension, I think.
Something like that. Um but yeah, this is not the only other trade that went down, but we had a couple other trades. Um, talking about interesting trades. We mentioned the Wizards have been active. Can you
Yeah.
talk about the Wizards real quick?
Yeah,
I
man,
just want
this
to
is a
go
weird
there.
one. This is
Yeah,
when
I
I
don't
first
know.
saw that, my instant reaction is like, this is weird.
I didn't have a reaction. I just kind of stared at the screen. I didn't really understand what I was looking at. So New Orleans trade CJ Kelly Olynyk, future second rounder, to New Orleans for Jordan Poole, Sadiq Bey, and the number 40 pick in this draft. And let's take a mosey over to the Wizards depth chart now at this time. They've collected CJ McCollum, Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton, on this, and let's not forget, they got Malcolm Brogdon. They have like an interesting collection of veterans here. Corey Kispert is maybe turning into a veteran at this point. And then they got these interesting young guys. Alex Sarr, in terms of like role, the young guys who have been developing Keyshawn George, or shown things. Not sure yet what Bob Carrington could be. Um, Another young developing role player in Justin Champagnie. They've got some young guys mixed in with their old vets, and I'm just kind of curious what the vision is here. I don't necessarily hate it. It's a little reminiscent. It's almost like a power move of like what the Pistons did. In terms of getting in vets to mix with the young guys. Um, do you do you sense like this is purposeful in terms of they feel like they got these young guys? Oh, and I did not even mention Bilal Coulibaly, who I still am
Mhm.
high on. I think Bilal's got a lot of untapped potential. Does this feel like a move that, pushes them closer to kind of play in slash, more serious development for their young guys? Or is this just kind of reaching for the middle for a team that should not be reaching for the middle and should continue just to focus on the draft and focus on just looking for young talent and not be filling their salary cap like this.
I mean, I think they're kind of in the right mold. I think they've got their kind of couple of guys, especially in Sarr and Koulibaly, that they really believe in. They've obviously got the number 6 pick this year that's going to be coming in and filling that role. And I think that those are the core guys that they want to build around. And the way they've kind of accumulated these veterans is just being as like they've really just kind of done it as sellers. And I know they're going into this year with all these veteran guys, and it's gonna be the same sort of situation. Like it wouldn't be crazy to see one of their veteran guys, maybe like a Marcus Smart, get traded before the
Mhm.
season, and then they could be sellers throughout the year, and or possibly just wait till the following summer, and then really just kind of go rebuild, see what they can pick up in free agency. I think at the moment they're set up to have like over 100 million in cap space in 2026 with all the expiring deals. And I think that's kind of an area that they're looking at to kind of maybe they can fill out their roster with a few more pieces that make sense around their young core. Because I think they know that the young core is their future. They're not trying to be competitive now. They're trying to have like solid leadership in the locker room, and just I think they're focusing on the development of the young guys, and the vets are just kind of the vets are almost just kind of there. The Wizards are just kind of playing the game at the moment. They're not really too worried about competing or overall roster building. They're just kind of playing the game and focusing on the development of these young guys.
Yeah, and I truthfully can't look at this roster and I don't think they're going to do anything. And this is not me like, oh, the Wizards are going to make they're going to win games. But just in terms of personnel, just in terms of like personality and what we know about these individuals, like it's hard to think of a locker room better and more dynamic than CJ McCollum, like what he's accomplished in this league, and the leadership that he's had beyond on the court, but off the court for the NBA. Marcus Smart, who has been such a vocal leader, has had serious postseason experience. Same thing with Chris Middleton, a champion. These guys, like what leadership to have in a locker room like that, and to really look up to for these young guys. And I mean, I think that there's value in that. There's value in that. You're remiss to talk to any all-star, young all NBA player and not have them talk about their vets. Like that's always such a key part to development. Uh, and again, I mean, a la the Detroit Pistons. Not to say that I would think they're going to be on a similar level. I think the Pistons are they really hit on
They
those
don't have
veteran
a kid.
pickups. Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. That's the difference, and that's not the argument I'm making. But I think when you look at their development in a nutshell, like that's been a huge part of it. You can see that it's palpable. Um, so that's an interesting one. I think there's something there. Um,
What about the Pell
any
side of
other
it?
trades we got to talk about here?
What about the Pell
Oh, the
side of
Pell
it
side.
quickly? I mean,
Eh?
Jordan
Eh?
Poole, that's a big investment.
I
Jordan Poole's under
don't
contract. Like
know. I
that's
don't
a
know.
like their core for next year. DeJounte Murray he's coming off an Achilles, right? Jordan Poole and Zion Williamson. Like, what are the Pels? What are the Pels
That's what I'm saying.
building
I
here?
looked at it. I was like, I don't know what to make of it. I have nothing. I have nothing there. There's probably a smarter basketball person that can come up with a theory with it, but I truly can't make sense of that. Um, we've already tried the Jordan Poole reclamation thing. We've not seen anything different, monumentally different out of him. Sadiq Bey is a known entity.
It's
I think
solid, yeah.
yeah, I think he'll fit into to what they do defensively there. And he'll be a solid floor spacer, defender. Um, yeah, things have really changed for the New Orleans Pelicans. Things have really changed. I think that health will be a really big prognosticator for them next season. Uh, it's just impossible to know what they look like until they're healthy. They've just not been healthy. It's does maybe Jordan Poole is a fun bench piece for them that really injects some shooting there because I think at times getting more willing 3-point shooters, maybe that's an important piece to have next to Zion.
A
I
lot of
think
money for
that
a bench guy. I think he'll gonna be starting, especially with
uh
DeJounte out. I assume he'll be starting. But I
yeah.
don't know when. I don't know. Obviously, Jante kind of did that at the start of the year, so I don't know what the plan is. I guess maybe he could be back by Christmas. I'm not 100% sure what the timeline is with his injury.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like final form of a team where Jordan Poole is like if they if the Pelicans get back to where they were defensively and having Zion at full tilt and how good they looked,
Yeah, the
I think
continued growth
having a
of Trey
Jordan Poole
Murphy
off the
too
bench
and
is enough.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So there's it's easy to poke fun at the Pelicans when they've had nothing but disaster all season and trying something new and getting a younger maybe less efficient, way less playmaking oriented version of CJ McCollum maybe is part of extending their window a little bit, although I don't quite see it yet. I've not processed it enough to see the vision of replacing CJ's minutes with Jordan Poole. I don't love it. And I don't love also getting rid of Kelly Olynyk, who I think is a functional big, especially around Zion Williamson, although it makes their defense that much worse. But there's a lot of things to fix, and this is one of many things that need to be fixed about the Pelicans roster at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think you kind of look at it, kind of like, okay, they clearly wanted to get younger. They clearly wanted to get some sort of value for Kelly Olynyk and CJ McConnell. Didn't want to just wait to the deadline, sell them cheap, or lose them for nothing next year. They kind of didn't really want to invest more time in those guys. So it kind of makes sense, but definitely one you have to keep an eye on and see how that develops over the season. All right, last up, we got to talk the Celtics. They talked about
Yep.
making their sales. Now they've done it. Like KP and Drew Holiday were the obvious guys. Like they were the guys we kind of knew were gonna get traded, and they've traded both of them. They're now going to save 180 million in taxes just by trading the two of those guys. Just shows how far over the line that this Boston team was, which was just absolutely insane. They're now under the second apron, which is huge for them. I think that makes them a lot more likely to be able to afford to bring back Al Horford for next year. But what they got from it, I mean, obviously KP was like ultra pennies on the dollar. He's now in
Oh my
Atlanta.
God, yeah.
They get Georgie Yang on a second rounder. And then the Drew Holiday one was interesting. They pick up Anthony Simons in 2 seconds. Anthony Simons is a really interesting piece to add into this Boston team because that guy is like he could be a legit scorer. Yeah, their defense is going to take a hit, but he could be a legit scorer for this team. So it's like one of them. Even though it felt like they were both going to be sold off for nothing, I feel like they got back one interesting piece and then they just got rid of KP. They got KP off the books. That's kind of the feeling of it early.
Yeah. One aspect of it that I want to look at is either going to the KP trade itself. Like we knew that his time had run up, that they were not going to wait for him to get healthy. And I guess the question that still needs to be answered is why was he not healthy? And
Hmm.
maybe, maybe the Hawks know more than the average fan does in terms of his medicals. And they know why he wasn't healthy, and they know why it was worth them getting off the 22nd pick, essentially,
Hmm.
to make this move for him. But I just want to think real quick about the Hawks, like the Hawks side of things. They just get KP, and now they're gonna field the team next year of Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Reese Shea, another year of development for him. Jalen Johnson coming back healthy. The really great year that he had that was cut short. Like he was one of my favorite players last season. And then you finally get like a very different look at the five compared to the last years that they've had with Okongwu, Capella, um, and really this is the first time they'll have a true pick and pop big. And then you do that alongside the slashing ability of Jalen Johnson, Dyson, uh, and you still got another big floor spacer in Risa Shea, a 6'10" wing, a 6'10", multifaceted wing, then the massive size of Kristaps, then the all NBA defense of Dyson Daniels. Trae Young kind of finally has a team that maybe can play like elite defense next to him. Like
Maybe,
that's
maybe.
this is the first time I feel like you look at this roster and okay, again, if KP is healthy, and I'm not saying he's going to be, and I'm not saying he's gonna, this is not a prediction, but like that, and then you still Clint Capella as a backup big, that's kind of elite. Like he's kind of past his prime of
Nah,
playing
nah.
that level of minutes.
It'll be a Kungwu as the backup big. Well, Capella's out there. Capella's gone.
You think he'll be gone? Probably,
I
probably
think
gone.
he's a free agent, or if not, they'll definitely trade him.
Yeah, I think that would probably make more sense. But I I am a little wary of not having a few extra bodies behind KP. That's my only thought. But just looking at this team and what if KP is a version of himself that Hawks I think made a pretty decent trade here. I was really curious to see what team would really value him and take a swing on him, and it didn't cost too much. It appeared, but Atlanta really I think may have hit something on their roster here if he's healthy.
It was a trade completely and totally worth the risk.
Hmm.
Only under contract for this year. If it doesn't work out, they move on. They're not going to miss the 22 number 22 pick or Terrence Mann all that much. I think this is a very smart move from Atlanta. I think it's exactly what they could need. Like, obviously, let's just talk. We'll talk about it as if KP is going to be healthy. That's the way we gotta look at it. And if he comes in, like him and Trey Young playing pick and roll, pick and pop, like that could be incredible. And they could do double big lineups with a Kongwu and Porzingis out there. Like this Atlanta team could be legit next year. They could, like, especially with the way the East is going, like they should absolutely be a team willing to make some moves and believing that they could fight for a top six seed in the Eastern Conference next year.
Yeah.
And a healthy KP allows them to do that. And I think him and Trey together could be a whole lot of fun. Like they could they could show some of the flashes that we saw from Jalen Brunson and Cat this season during the regular season as a pick and roll duo. This is a smart move from Atlanta, and it's nice to see them being aggressive. And obviously, like I said, it's not too big of a risk, only under contract for the 1 year, but it's nice to see them still being willing to take these little risks because they still have they believe they still have their star guy, so it's nice to see them continuing to make moves around him.
Yeah, yeah. I still think that it's not a huge risk when you have other bigs behind them, and you still know what your team looks like without KP. You didn't get off anyone major,
Yeah,
so you can take that risk without worrying about setting yourself back too much. Um, and back to the Celtics side of things, we saw this coming. Like obviously they're going to save that money. I think the interesting one was Anthony Simons. Um, and it feels like for me, like it's a temporizing move. Like he's not a guy that you pick up thinking that he's like this developmental guy. It'll kind of help his tank a little bit. Like it feels like a guy who fits their team. He's under contract through next season, and he's an unrestricted free agent in the following season. So it's again just a 1 year thing. So you can get off the money, and he's a guy that I feel like fits their offense. He's going to add a scoring punch, and I feel like it'll just keep them a little bit more relevant. Like they're not going to go into the season thinking about. I mean, maybe tanking is not the word, but like kind of retooling. That's the
yeah,
vibe.
yeah. No, that's always the way it was. Like we knew they were gonna ditch each other, and now it's just a obviously now all the rumors are red hot now, but apparently the Celtics want to trade up and get into the lottery this year. Apparently they're receiving a lot of calls about Jalen Brown and Derek White. Now that would shock me. Like these two trades didn't like I feel like we all saw these coming. This always kind of felt like the vibe they were going to trade these two guys. If they were to trade another one of the core of the Tatum Brown White core, now that would be very surprising. I don't see that happening
I don't
unless they
see.
got a monster offer. But I would be like, that would be like, I'd be like, okay, are you guys sure you're going to be ready to build another contender when Tatum comes back? Like, that would be a very interesting development. But I don't see that happening. I think Boston have made the moves they're going to make, and now it's kind of about working around the margins, seeing how they can maybe bring back Horford. I think they'd have to trade Sam Hauser as well if they were wanting to bring back Cornette too. So that's going to be still a little bit difficult for them. But they're still going to have a competitive team next year. It's going to be interesting to see kind of who takes the lead role. Like, is it like this, like all in Jalen Brown? Like, how much balance will there be with like him and Simons and White? And like obviously Pritchard coming off the bench as well. That's one guy we know is not getting traded because his contract is
Yeah.
incredible. Um, only thing you will say is that you probably don't want to have Anthony Simons and Pritchard sharing the backcourt too often defensively.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. But I do feel like the interesting thing is going to be Al Horford. Al Horford, how is he going to look next season? I don't think we haven't really seen the drop off yet. What is that backline defense going to look like? Obviously, we've seen them without KP. I think it would have been pretty funny if they had actually made that trade and somehow got Rob Williams back. Um, but Anthony Simons, he's not there for the defense, but he's there to fit in that offense. They're going to be launching as many threes, and I think they'll still with the 3 point volume and 3 point creation that this team knows how to make. I think that they'll still be in the playoff hunt, and it'll be interesting to see, after all these years of people undervaluing the playmaking of Jason Tatum and the gravity he holds and how much this offense runs through him. it'll be interesting to see the drop off and how much offense they can actually create without him. Can they still be this 3-point juggernaut without Jason Tatum on the floor? We'll see.
Yeah, no, it's going to be very interesting to watch Boston. It's going to also keep it interesting to see if they end up moving up in the draft. But one element of this final trade with KP was the Brooklyn Nets getting involved, picking up that 22nd pick,
Hmm.
giving them five first round picks overall in tomorrow's draft. And let's get over to the draft talk because
Mm,
my first prediction, obviously it's a lot clearer now, but I had this before this trade went down before they had their five picks, but
okay.
I thought Ace Bailey was angling to be a Brooklyn Net, and I think the fact that
I've heard it.
I think they've got all these picks now. I think, or they if they have to trade up, they'll do it. They'll package a deal to trade up to either the 4 or the 5 spot if they need to. But I could also see him falling to them at that number 8 spot. Ace Bailey, he's gonna be a net.
They that I really like that, and I think that's a reasonable prediction because I think there are too many teams who are very confused about him. You can't find a single draft report on him, a single scouting report on him that isn't heavily conflicted on his potential. Um, and you go up and down. Like if you look at 76ers, I don't think they want to take that swing. I'm not sure if the Hornets are the right place for that. They already got Brandon Miller in that position, and Ace Bailey's pretty clear about who he wants to be. He does not want to work for the Jazz, does not want to work out for the Wizards. But the one team, uh, I'm pretty sure he worked out for the Pelicans. So if the Nets are packaging picks to the Jazz, I could easily see them doing that. But I could also see the Jazz being a team that's like, I don't care, we're drafting him, right?
Yeah.
You know how much they love wings there. Um, the Hornets, maybe not so much. Maybe they do need a couple more guys. They need to add more talent to this roster. But that is gonna be an interesting one. Just watching the tape, though, how do you feel about his game? Like his highs are so high. Like his high, if you just watched a highlight reel of Ace Bailey, you'd be like, whoa, this guy is incredible. And then you watch some of the more like clips looking at his defensive lapses. You look at some of his shot selection. You look at his shooting percentages, and then you start to question a little bit about like who really is this guy? Is this guy a inefficient shot chucker? Does he really have the passing chops? Does he have the eye to pass? And does he ultimately have like enough of the handle to be this lead guy that he wants to be? And there's just so many things that need to break right. It's a confusing evaluation for a guy who doesn't have the mindset to and doesn't have the current tools to just plug in as a traditional like 3-and-D wing that develops into more of that dominant wing that is a more traditional pathway. Um, versus what we've seen over the past is wings who try to be shot creators that aren't shot creators and end up being inefficient and then fizzle out and are nowhere to be seen again in 5 years. Which one is he? That's the tricky part here.
Yeah, I mean, he's putting a lot of pressure on himself, whether how much of this is coming from him, how much of this is coming from his representation, how the people around him telling him that this is the right way to go. I mean, we've seen criticism coming from Paul George and others. I think it's pretty clear he's going out and saying, I want to be in a big market and I instantly want to be the face of that big market. And that's why I was drawn to him going to the Brooklyn Nets.
Hmm.
That's like a bold move to come out and make. But like that, like he's a type of player that I guess I understand he's definitely the type of player that needs to be in a place that he can make his mistakes and it won't really hurt his minutes. He's allowed to be out there making his mistakes and learning. And I think like it's all about how much he's willing to listen to his coaches, how much he's willing to really develop and like how much of this attitude is a thing of just getting to the right area and then he'll change back, or is this going to be a problem that he always has that he thinks too highly of himself and is not willing to put in the work to
Yeah.
make up for the little deficiencies that are in his game? That's going to be the ultimate telling mark of whether this guy becomes a legit lottery player, a potential all-star, or if this guy is going to crap out in a few years and be nothing more than than a bench guy.
I I can't think of a more perfect place for him in his mind and a worse place. There's some worse places, but I can't think of a worse situation for him in terms of Brooklyn, a team that is not trying to win. Yeah, there's a couple teams here in the lottery, to be fair, that fit that mold. But a team that is not going to push him to be consistent defensively, to be consistent as a playmaker, to make the right rotations, to not be undisciplined on weak side defense, to be ball watching. That doesn't seem like the exact place where he is forced to learn that. Um, and if there's so many pieces of his game in those sort of intangibles in terms of his selection and earning his minutes and earning those shots, that that strikes me as a bad match. And that's what that would concern me.
Mhm.
But I can see it. I can see it. There's not a lot of precedent for that, to be honest, for a player of his type to just come in and be like that guy. And very interesting for Paul George to point that out. Because you look at the Paul George mold, you look at the Kawhi mold, you look at guys that came in and learned to be, defense first players, to make an impact on that end, to be all around, to make an all around impact. You look at Jimmy Butler as well. Even Jason Tatum, you know, look at Gordon Hayward.
It's the
Look
easy,
at the guys.
it's legit like the easiest way to earn minutes. Play good defense, play honest defense. Like I
Yeah.
don't care what anyone says. Like it's the easiest way to earn minutes in the NBA.
And that's how those guys became stars. Those guys became
Yeah.
stars because they were impact defenders. They became stars because not only were they did they have the size on that end, but they played well on the boards, they played well defensively, they played both ends, they ran the floor, and then you look at wow, they do everything, and then they earn the right to be taking those shots and then the shot clock. They earn the right to be the go-to option. And that there's a rite of passage there. There's a pathway to that. And none of these guys came in uh, trying to be the guy in the face of a franchise like that. That just is not what's happened. Maybe Ace Bailey is different, but it didn't show up at Rutgers. That's for sure. Is it
No,
going to show
no,
up in the
this is
NBA? I don't know about that.
this is a super interesting situation. This is definitely one I'm gonna definitely be keeping my eye on throughout his rookie year and in the first few years in the league. Like this could go so many different ways. Like if it comes true, you're kind of just like, okay, man, respect, respect. But if it doesn't, he's gonna hear it from here, there, and everywhere. But definitely gonna be an interesting one to watch. So going from players we maybe have a doubt about to players we really believe in and like. Who you got? Who you got in this draft as a guy that you kind of really look at and say, this is a guy I can't wait to watch this guy.
Yeah, well, let's get into the second obvious guy. There's been one obvious player, Cooper Flag, has been talked about all season that we've had a chance to talk about. And the second obvious player who's never really changed on most mock drafts, most big boards, is Dylan Harper, son of none other than former NBA champion Ron Harper. My delight to find out he's a fellow Filipino, which amazes me at his size at 6'5". But I've had a chance to get into his game a little bit more and look at him because there's an interesting situation we have where the Spurs kind of lucked into that number two pick. And, there's always this question of talent or fit. And for a team like that, you're still in the developing stages. I think it's been pretty clear that all the reporting is they're going to take Dylan Harper. So looking at him and looking at his skill set, I think we've been remiss to not talk about him more. I think especially for you, my friend, a big Jalen Brunson fan, I think you get a lot of really fun, crafty offense from this guy, a 6'5" player who's not really an above the rim player, but is strong, really knows how to use his body to get to his spots, really can play off of 2 feet and pivots. And I think for a guy who's mostly an on-ball creator, really showed shades of being an off-ball player as well. Like he's a great cutter. He's a decent three-point shooter as well. We looked at him in college being 37% on catch and shoot threes, really good instincts on cutting. And I think that really is going to allow him to play alongside a Stephon Castle, play alongside De'Aaron Fox. And I think that when you look at this kind of player, um, He's not super athletic. He's not like jumping out of the gym. He's not the fastest guy. He's just such a good finisher. He's over 80% of his makes are unassisted, 65% at the rim and the half court, despite having ankle injuries. You look at a guy who's got a really polished game, and I mentioned Jalen Brunson because there are just shades of that where, especially with his size, like how crafty he can be and how patient he is with his finishes. And we've seen that that does translate in the NBA in this game. And I think I'm really excited to see him hit the NBA floor and maybe be a long-term partner next to Wemby.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. He's a super interesting guy because it's always so important when you see these guys that you just really believe their understanding of the game is really there and they understand what makes them great and they've found ways to just to ride that like Brunson, like he's an undersized guy, but his footwork and little things like that's what make him capable obviously now of being a star. We're not gonna say Dylan Harper is instantly gonna get to a Jalen Brunson sort of level, but
Yeah, yeah,
I think the intangibles there are great. All the little things that you look at when you're drafting a top guy are there, especially coming into a team where you know he's going to have the opportunity to make mistakes, where he's going to have the opportunity to grow. And I think, like you said, that off-ball game is what's really important. I think that ability to really beef that up, to really continue to be a really good off-ball player, that will definitely earn him minutes as a rookie, and just to fit in with this whole team. Which there's a lot of cooks. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this Spurs team, and being able to play off ball, being able to play off of Wemby and De'Aaron Fox is going to be hugely important. And I think that's something that Dylan Harper can for sure do. So I'm almost kind of glad to see that they got the second pick. Obviously, he could easily go into a complete rebuilding team like a Charlotte or a Utah and be like the star guy, and that'd be cool to see too. But seeing him land in a spot that already have their superstar and getting to see him grow alongside that is going to be super fun as well.
yeah. Do you think there's any chance still that he gets traded on draft night? Or is it just a foregone conclusion?
I don't think so. I think maybe like maybe would the Spurs like listen to like an offer from Utah that included like marketing the number five and some other bits? Like that's a long shot. Maybe that'll happen unless they're like looking to trade for Giannis. The Giannis trade is still on the table. Then that's probably the only way I really see it happening.
Yeah. Um, who do you got outside of because I think there's like a very interesting like Dylan Harper's a clear like 1B or 2A type player. Then there's this tier 2A, 2B. We look at guys like VJ, like Nipple, Trey Johnson, and question mark Ace Bailey, probably Ace Bailey is in this mix. We already talked about Ace. Which of these guys are interesting to you? Because I feel like they're very different players, very very different, and they're not perfect guys. They have pretty specific skill sets they're going to bring into the NBA. Any one of them in particular interesting to you, and what teams maybe would you be excited to see them drafted to in this mix from 3 to 6, really?
Trey Johnson is my guy. I
Yeah.
love Trey Johnson. I'm so excited to see what he can become in the NBA. I think his ability as a scorer, and more importantly as an off-ball scorer, is like super exciting. He's obviously got ability on ball as well, but to see the prowess he has as an off ball scorer. This guy is like legit. Like you could absolutely make the argument that he is the best shooter in this draft. Not far off the best scorer in this draft. That's ultimately probably going to turn out to be Cooper Flag, but he's right up there as well. And just the potential for his scoring, the off ball star, his playmaking ability is there. I think that kind of got shut down a little bit too much. His ability as a playmaker playing within that Texas
Hmm.
team.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be something that he absolutely has. I'm not saying he's going to come in and be freaking Magic Johnson or anything like that, but as a secondary, tertiary playmaker, yeah, for sure, 100%. He's got a lot of room to improve. He needs to get better finishing at the rim. His decision making needs to improve, but that's gonna come. This is a 19-year-old kid. Like I think that like he's in a perfect mold of what you should be as a 19-year-old. Not the finished package, but
Yeah.
has more than enough ability, and especially he has like the little intangibles where I think there's a lot of great fits for him. Like I think if he went to Philly, at number three. Maybe that's a little bit high for him, but if he went to fit in number three, I think he could fit in instantly as that
Mm,
off ball shooter playing like spot minutes here and there. I think he could be a great fit there. Then you could also see him go to a spot like maybe Utah where he kind of just gets the ball and he's like, yeah, like you want to be our star, go and show us that you're our guy to build this team ultimately around. I think it's going to be very interesting to see where he ends up. I think that could really decide where he goes as a player, but his all round game and his upside potential it really excites me.
yeah. He's you don't typically see guards that are this dynamic off the catch as he is, while showing that much prowess on ball. And obviously it hasn't all come together yet. A lot of it has to do, I feel like, with his strength overall. But just looking at his measurables, he's 6 foot 4.75. Let's call him 6'5". Give him the quarter inch. 6'5". He's got a positive wingspan, 6 foot 10 and a quarter wingspan. He has an 8 foot 5 standing reach. And if you look at his athleticism, this guy moves like he moves like a small guard. Very fluid. And dude, I mean, I a lot of nice looking jump shots in this draft class, but I feel like he has the between him and Jeremiah Fears is in terms of like movement shooters off the dribble, off the catch. Like, but Trey has a unbelievable shot, dude. With the volume, that's what the crazy part is for me. Like, off almost 7 shots per game, he's shooting 43%, 42.7, or sorry, 39.7%. But that 43 mark, looking at the difficulty of his shots, and
Hmm.
then the percentage I want to look at here, off screens, he nailed 17 threes at a 55% rate. And just looking at his footwork off of those screens, like looking at how he could be his movement shooter, like he could fit anywhere. You throw him in, and he's gonna be able to call on screens. He's gonna be able to play without the ball. He hit 41% of his catch and shoot threes, and that's a guy that, again, he has a role. He can come into a team. He can play a role. He doesn't have to be the guy right away, but you put the ball in his hands, and you can start to see him catch fire like that. And I mean, a pull-up player too. This is, I think, the most impressive percentage for me for a young wing player like him. 38.4% of his pull-up threes, and that's on volume.
Hmm.
Uh, he's an exciting player for me. I just am not sure. I think the question mark for me is how good he gets defensively, and if he physically gets strong enough to be a
Yeah.
finisher around the rim, does he end up being a guy who can break down defenses and put pressure on the rim? Because then that's where you start to break open his game as an offensive player. Uh, but yeah, I'm curious to see where he goes, man. Like this guy can fit in a lot of places, and super talented guy. Um, what one guy or two guys? I want to talk real quick about VJ and Khan. Khan, I wanted to talk about him because I feel like he's gonna be the typical white guy that just gets pegged as he's a shooter. And a shoot like that's undeniable. He's an elite shooter. He's the best shooter in the draft. 91.4% from the line, 40.6% off catch and shoot threes, 58% true shooting off screens, and as a mid-range shooter, he shot 43.2% on pull-ups. But is he athletic? No. Is he quick? No. Is he explosive? No. Can he jump? No. But he's strong and he's a decent finisher. He shot 62.1% half court rim finishes. I think that speaks to that he's not just this one-dimensional player. While he does not play above the rim, I think there's some potential for him to attack closeouts if NBA teams are just going to aggressively get him off the line. If he can attack closeouts and he can actually continue to hit that mid-range shot, if he can continue to be a average at least rim finisher. I think he's going to be a very decent NBA player, and I think that his quick decision making as well is going to allow him to stay on the floor. Obviously, defense can be a question. He competes on that end, but how is that going to compete at the NBA level? But dude's, I think he's more than just like a shooter. I think he's going to be at a minimum, a very good rotation player wherever he goes.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of like looking at his all-round game, he's a little bit like he's like a low-key kind of jack of all trades in terms of like his size and what he can do in terms of like, got a little bit of playmaking, like solid rebounder for a guy his size. Obviously, a great shooter. Like I like look at him and I'm kind of like I feel like his like career arc could like almost like range anywhere between like a TJ McConnell type of buzz all the way to like a maybe like a Kyle Korver, JJ Redick sort of vibe. Like I could see him kind of going any of those ways, like with the talent that he's got and his ability. I think if he's encouraged to play a little bit more on ball and little things like that, I think like his career could take a lot of different turns. So he's going to be one for sure that is like super interesting to watch where he goes and see how he develops and what which of his skills translates from Duke into the NBA.
Yeah, I think he's far from a simple one-dimensional player. I think he'll be a good player wherever he goes. VJ is interesting to me.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on VJ? I think his highlight reel speaks for itself. It's very easy to fall in love with his open court play and his dunks. But going beyond that, have you had second thoughts about him? What do you think his potential is?
He's so tough because he's the type of player that you want to believe in. You want to like you see like you follow over the sidelines, you watch him play, and like he plays the game the right way. Got like saw the length. Like he could be like you want to look at him and say, yeah, that guy's gonna be a star in the NBA. But I don't know. Some of the tape you watch, some of like the analysis breakdown of him, it kind of makes you worry a little bit. But I think where he's kind of projected mostly to go now is Philly. And I feel like that's good for him. I feel like a spot like Philadelphia, even though it's hard to say anything is good about going to Philadelphia with like it always seems to be every other year seems to be a disaster in Philadelphia. But I think where he lands is super important. And I think if he goes at number three and they give him time to develop and they're willing to be patient with him, I think that could ultimately be a great thing for him,
You worry about his finishing.
of course.
I I feel like just the glaring thing, and there's so much complexity to the analysis of these players and how many different ways that they could improve on their game. Which skills are they able to work on which team? Which system really will showcase them? You know, VJ Edgecombe in like a Pacers-esque system where he's mostly just like leaking out, playing in the open court would be just amazing, right? You won't see a lot of that. If he gets drafted to a team that a little bit slower pace, playing a little bit more in the half court. He's spaced to the corners, just kind of relegated as a cutter in that fashion. Or a team that's expecting him to do a little bit more on the ball, wants to experiment with him with the point guard. Those situations kind of worry me. Like his finishing was not impressive for a guy who is, I think, kind of hands down the most athletic player in this draft.
Mhm.
And that's what's so tantalizing about him. He's just super, super fast. He's got a really quick step, just explosive jumper, and elite defender, elite competitor as well. Like I think that's a skill that's going to translate instantly, and that's going to pop off the page is his ability to stay in front of guys and really be a dog defensively, defend his chest, really quick feet. But the finishing, I'm pulling it up here now, but the shots at the rim, really jumping like off, typically off of 2 feet, and not really like getting good contact to get to the free throw line. That part's a little sketchy to me for a guy with his athleticism, and maybe that's something that improves. Like we see guys become better finishers as they continue to uh, learn, you know, the speed of the game. Well, that's like slowing down a little bit, getting to their deceleration steps. But looking at his finishing, he only made 48.9% of his attempts at the rim.
Mhm.
And again, point of reference, like Continental made 62% of his shots. And very different scenarios for sure. Like one, they're being defended very differently. But for a guy of his athleticism, that's a number you'd love to see get better. And it's it just depends on the evaluator. If you evaluate him, you're like, oh, that's something he's gonna get better at. He's going to improve his footwork. He'll get better at that. He'll be able to translate his athleticism to something different. But how many times have we on this podcast fallen in love with someone's just dripping athleticism, and then it doesn't always translate. And that's what started to scare me over the years of like evaluating guys and being like, oh, dude, look at him in the open court, look how fast he is. Oh, he'll just become a better finisher. And finishing is not always a thing. Like you look at your Dylan Harpers, you know, that those guys are not always the most um, athletic guys are not jumping on the gym, but there's a certain level of IQ and anticipation and ability to read defenders that allows them to be better finishers that not everyone ends up developing.
Hmm. No, no,
But
I agree with that. He's going to be one that's going to be interesting to watch. And like I said before, it's going to be super interesting where he ends up landing because that could really kind of decide a lot for him, especially in his early years in the NBA. What about I won't say sleepers. We'll say kind of wild cards that you think could turn into something more. My one, I think sleepers may be the wrong word because it is. I'm not going too deep on this one, but I think one that's super interesting is Derek Queen. I know
talk to me.
he's
Talk to
being
me.
like projected probably to still go in the lottery. Like at the moment, I think a lot of people have him going to the Suns at number 10. But this guy is just gonna. I think he brings the vibes. He plays in such a fun, exciting way. Like if his ability as a scorer and a rebounder can translate into the NBA, if he can figure out how to be like a league average 3 point shooter, this guy has absolutely got star potential. He joins this squad of Jokic wannabes. I would say like
Yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah,
another one.
yeah.
He's not quite as tall, not quite the elite passer, not quite the defender, not quite the shooter, but he kind of joins that squad of like the Şengün's, the Sabonises that they want to be Jokic, but they're not quite Jokic, and it just depends like how close can he get to that. Obviously, Jokic is the 99 percentile. He's the number one. Like how close can he get to that sort of level? And if he is even scratching the surface of that, that's an NBA star.
Yeah, it's he's fun because you just love those players. Like you love kind of that different funky style of play
Mhm.
and the ability for a big to be a playmaking hub like that. Um, and I'm curious. I guess the question is what team would see that and have the players that they're like, oh, this guy's gonna make our team better. Um, looking at that kind of like anywhere between like 8 and 15, who knows where he ends up falling. Not a lot of like pure creators on that team who need the ball in their hands. I think any one of Brooklyn, the Raptors, Suns, Blazers could look at a guy like that and be like, let's give that a shot. Let's let's see if this can be like our offensive system. Are you drafting a guy who could become a hub of your offensive system? And it's interesting. Like obviously, it's the risk there is obvious. Like, does defense pan out? Does
Yeah.
he ever become a good enough offensive player, a shooter? Can he really score at his size interior against NBA defense? And time will tell with that. It's really tough to say in college comparing that level of interior defense versus NBA defense. But I mean, the passing is exciting, and there's not a lot of guys who have vision like that. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
for
worth
sure.
the it's worth the risk. It's worth the risk.
Yeah, and obviously we know that where the frailties lie, like you just mentioned. Like obviously he's a guy that can be like a solid team defender, but he's not obviously a big man that you can really reliably build your defense around, which is super tough. I like if the Suns were going in the direction that I wish they were, which would be like a proper rebuild, I feel like I'd like to see him go there, and maybe he has the potential to grow and just kind of be the guy for a couple of years, and then they can really see what they've got. But I feel like the most likely outcome is he's drafted by the Suns and then he's ultimately shipped off somewhere else as part of the KD trade. Like I feel like that expands and they ultimately trade that number 10 pick. I
Mm.
feel like
You got
that's
a
what I
lot
want
of
to see
theories
happen.
today. You
Yeah,
got a lot of
man.
theories today.
I've been in my bag.
No, but he's a fun player, and I think it's about time. I mean, Suns haven't had a chance to develop a real good young player since I mean, talk about Dunn. Maybe Dunn's their young player they're developing, but he'd be an exciting guy to pair alongside the offensive talent, especially you got the slashing abilities of Jalen Green, the off ball shooting of Devin Booker. You give him a couple of guys to run alongside him off those DHOs and playing off the elbow, and I think that'd be pretty fun. Um, I got a guy who you look across every draft and you look for that funky defender and you're looking for that Draymond Green type of player. Not exactly Draymond Green, but who's that difference maker, defender who can do it all. And maybe he's not the sexiest offensive player, but the type of stuff he brings playmaking wise is cool. And I feel like those guys always really really intrigue me. The guy I look at is Colin Murray Boyles. And if you squint, you kind of see hints of that. He's nearly 6'8". He's got a 7 foot wingspan. You can play multiple positions defensively, but you can play with five, you can play with four, you can switch on to smalls, you can switch on to bigs. He's got enough foot speed to really be good against wings. Has just such good instincts defensively. Just constantly blowing up plays. His hands are elite. Like so many plays you see on his tape where the guy hasn't even gotten the pass off yet off of the post and it's in his hands. Like you blink and all of a sudden the ball is in his hands. Just constantly diving for loose balls. And in terms of like those intangibles, like this is such a defensive competitor. You see that he's a leader on the defensive side of the ball. But then you look at his size. I mean, he's 6'8", he's 250. I mean, 7 feet wingspan. Like this dude can really control the paint potentially and with some of the smaller lineups you see in the NBA. And then I think scouts talk about how he could be as a playmaker. Like he's a very good connecting piece. He can pass the ball. Imagining him in the short role, what he can do with a primary playmaker. Imagining him in a system where he can start to develop his shot a little bit, but utilize his line drives to be a playmaker there. But for a guy who could be that good defensively, have all defensive talent, and be like a productive piece in the offensive end, he's exciting to me. And you see him at the 12 range. There's a few teams there that I think would be interested in that. I think particularly for the Bulls.
Yeah.
You need more defensive playmakers. You need guys who are going to anchor things down. And you look at a team like the Pacers again. Like I think that's what's fun about the playoffs. It's fun about championship runs is teams get a little bit inspired. You think about all right, that team plays fast. Chicago's been playing fast all year, but what did they not have? They've not had a lot of defensive stalwarts, especially after losing Caruso. Team like the Bulls would be well suited for it. Blazers as well trying to really bolster up their defense. There's a lot of teams that could really use an anchor piece and maybe look to him to be their next version of a Draymond Green.
Yeah, like for sure. And I mean, being defense being your forte, like I think that's like the best starting ground. It's like the safest starting ground. When defense is your thing, that's like easiest way to earn minutes as a rookie. Easiest things to come in and build off. You build your offensive game around that and try and figure it out. Like obviously we've seen certain guys that haven't been able to do that, like Matisse Thybulle and a few other guys like that. But playing defense is your easiest way to minutes as a rookie, and the fact that that's like his like that's basically if you just like you're just looking at him, you're kind of mainly just focusing on the defense. You're like, okay, this guy can be a potentially elite defender. Yeah, maybe they're still raw on us about his offensive game, but we'll figure that out after. That's what we'll develop that, and he'll come in and already be an important defensive piece for us. So I think that's why a lot of teams will be looking at him, and maybe he could end up going maybe a little bit higher than he's projected to. But I think I like that mention of Chicago. I think that would definitely be a fit for him. That would be very interesting, and I think it would work. It would work there. I think that's a type of guy that they could do with.
Yeah, 3 stocks per game. 3 stocks. Need need a
Yeah.
playmaker like that, and I need something here, man. I
Chicago
need
need a whole
something.
he'd need a whole lot of everything, but yeah, it's always at least number 12. You can still find guys in number 12, so hopefully that's the way it goes. You'll be watching it a little bit more closely than me. I don't think the Knicks don't pick until the second round, if they even pick in the second round. Not even 100% sure, but
Yeah.
yeah. Final word, I just say obviously I'm also excited to see like where some of the European guys go. I feel like European players are still undervalued by a lot in the draft process. So you look at the guys like Noah Senge and Joan
Mm.
Berenger, like those kind of
Yeah.
guys. Like I'm interested
Yeah.
to see where they end up going, how far they fall, and what type of players they end up being. Because I think even though we still talk about the European players and like a lot of them have gone number one and in the lottery over the last few years, I feel like there's still a stigma against them. They're still kind of underestimated. So it's always interesting to see where those guys end up going and how they
Yeah.
develop in the NBA.
Don't forget Igor Demin. I mean, he played at BYU, but he technically Russian, played
Yeah.
for Real Madrid. Um, He's interesting. Those guys are raw. I'll throw out that shout out like Igor, uh, maybe one of the best passers in the draft, if not the best passer in the draft. Um, a lot of comps to Josh Giddey, but with less offense, which kind of scares me a little bit. Noah Senge, super athletic. Like he just feels like a blank slate. Like super athletic guy who shows flashes a bit of everything, and it would be cool to see him. Um, but those French guys, those scare me as well. But there's so many there's so many interesting players in this draft, and it feels like as you've looked up and down, there's so many players you haven't mentioned, like your Thomas Sorbers, and this is a deep draft. There's a lot of different flavors of players, a lot of wings, a lot of interesting bigs, like funky bigs, in this
Yeah.
draft. And just mentioned Thomas Over, like he's very like old school, like very like heavy interior focused, good defensively. And you got like the complete opposite, like a Derek Queen, who's like a Alperen Şengün 2.0 type of player. And then your Malawach, we haven't even talked about yet, but almost seems pegged as like the obvious first best big. But there's gonna be some slides here. We don't know where Ace Bailey's gonna go. It's really hard to project like what teams are gonna like which type of player in this draft because there's so many unique kind of builds here. But I think that this is not just about Cooper Flag, man. There's a lot of fun players to watch, a lot of fun stories, and can't wait to see it all happen.
Yeah, it all goes down tonight. Obviously, night one tonight, 8 p.m. In Brooklyn, and then night two. We got night two, and I don't think we really need to split it up into 2 days, but that's what the NBA decided to do. Before we get out of here, I'll just ask you: do you have a top three targets for your Bulls at number 12?
I think it has to be a big. It has to be a big. It would be fun to have a guy like Murray Boyles. But I think if a guy were to fall, if a Malawach were to fall, I would want the Malawach. I think that that's one thing this team is missing is elite size to really potentiate their defense. Obviously, it would be great to have a dynamic, multifaceted, versatile forward slash big like Boyles. And you mentioned Queen, and I think I'm just all in on the bigs here. Um, I'm not really delusional to think any of the aforementioned players that we mentioned, like our Knipples, our Baileys, our Johnsons, are gonna fall there. But as much as it pains me to think about another 4 6 years of a defensive sieve, Derek Queen was interesting to me,
Hmm.
especially with the off-ball talent we have in this team, and questioning whether or not Josh Giddey is part of the future. He excited me a little bit more than a guy like Thomas Sorber, who's a little bit more of a traditional route and not as dynamic for a team that I think wants to run. So I think if Malowich falls, I'm excited. Obviously, take that 10 times out of 10. But if we could snag a piece like Boyles, I'd be happy with that too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like that. And obviously, this, like we always keep saying, like obviously the Bulls have kind of made all the bad decisions. Hopefully, that they're able to make, and hopefully they'll get on the right track now. But we shall see. That's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for sticking with us. NBA draft tonight. More trades will go down. Will we see a Giannis trade? Will we see some trade ups and trade downs? I think this is the prime year where we are going to see a lot of movement, especially in and around the lottery in the NBA draft. I think be on the lookout for your team moving up or moving down, because I think this is the prime year for stuff like that to happen. We know who the number one pick is going to be. Not quite like last year where there's a little bit of debate about it, but a lot of talent in this draft, and it all goes down tonight. But Chris, thanks so much for sticking with me. Thank you for your insight, and of course, remember we're everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.